Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of You Gotta Meet, where I have the very lucky opportunity to sit down and have completely unscripted, meaningful human connections with individuals who have pushed the limits of their lives in very interesting ways and are still to this day authentically grounded in so many ways. And today I am very lucky to have Mike Schoenberger. He was making sure I had that done properly at the beginning. And with that many letters, you know what? You got to take a couple of stabs at it. But Mike is an incredible guy. You know, he's a storyteller, an entrepreneur, and a TEDx speaker who whose work explores what it means to lead with an open heart. After decades of building Sunco Communication and Installation Unlimited into a thriving, values-driven company, Mike discovered that his true calling lives beneath the titles, helping people reconnect with themselves and with each other. His keynote talks and real human connection framework invite audiences to slow down, to turn inwards, and remember the courage it takes to truly be seen. Mike's journey from a shy young man to a leader who advocates for radical love in business and in life informs the personal story that he shares in his book, which we will make sure we put into the notes of this particular podcast. A longtime member of the Entrepreneurs Organization and the Edmonton Executives Association, Mike invests heavily in the entrepreneurial community through mentorship, board service, and advising emerging ventures. He is a past Leaders in an Edmonton Award recipient and credits much of his company's success to implementing EOS, which transform both Sunco's culture and its growth. But above all, Mike is a man who values connection over accolades. He finds grounding in nature, meaning in conversation, and joy in the quiet mountain moments he shares with his wife, Jackie, the place where every story truly begins. Mike, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. And I'm like, holy crap, who is that guy? Love the bio. A note on the book. It's not written yet. It's in the process of being written. Hope to be out by the end of this year. So.
I was going through the bio there, and I kept thinking, any moment now, I'm going to come across the title of this book. But it's coming out in the future. Do you have a working title?
It's Radical Love Leadership is what is resonating for me at this moment.
So let's just dive right into that. You know, here you are, an individual who I just got to know recently, and I want to put this out there to people who are listening to this or watching this. It's so amazing to me how often people get frustrated that their life doesn't come with as many opportunities as they would like, or as many friendships, or as many chances to fall in love, or to travel to new and interesting places. They just feel like their life is complacent, and yet they don't realize how much of a role they play in that reality. And the reason you and I are here talking for just the second time in our lives is simply because you saw something on the internet, you reached out to me on LinkedIn, you're like, hey man, kind of like, I like what you're up to, I'm up to a lot of the same stuff, we should talk. And in my case, I love it when people do that, and so I got back and I said, yeah, let's do it, and then we just jumped on a Zoom call. For so many people, that by itself is a radical idea. The idea of having a conversation with a stranger, could you imagine? I mean, I might just drop dead by the end of it. So all these negative things could happen. And it's just like so cool that you just reached out, and I do the same thing. The sad part is that I'm not sure what your experience is, but I get a lot of people who just don't respond, or they say they're too busy, or they'll say some other time, not realizing it's like the universe just provided you with an opportunity to expand. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love everything that you said about that, and it's so true. And I think if you were to like peel back the onion to where that starts, it's because as human beings, you know, when those that have children are like super curious, and they're not afraid of anything, and they'll try anything, and they'll say anything, and they don't care if they're being stupid or playful. And sometimes the best gift you can give them is a box. And as we get older, we get all these programs. You're not good enough. You're silly. You're not working hard enough. And we get this self-talk that creates a fear of not wanting to put up your hand, of not putting yourself out for fear of something happened, right? And that's where I'm like, if you can start with loving yourself first, and trusting yourself to, I'm just going to say what I say and learn from it, right? And with curiosity, like that curiosity of a 3-year-old,
Right.
learning and I think it's just all about mindset.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things is that fable of that farmer that, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And we don't need to go through the story. The premise of it is when really crappy stuff happens in their life, if you look at it as, oh my God, I'm going to be traumatized forever, then you're going to be traumatized forever. But if you take a step back from it, once the emotional connection of the situation subsides, there's learning in it and growth.
Yes, that's just it.
And so, that's kind of how I answer that question is, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
By following a doorway or a window or a breeze that hits you that you feel pulled towards.
That, it's funny because it's like I have so many times in my life, and I'm sure you've had similar situations where somebody comes to you and they'll say, I have this big thing I want to do with my life. And the only reason that they're not willing to start is because they haven't figured out every single step. Like they have to know exactly how it's going to go in order to decide whether or not they will do the thing. And as we get older, it becomes more of a thing in our lives. Whereas when we were younger, I find this interesting. My kids are still young, ages 8 and 10. And I'll say to them, hey, so-and-so is having a birthday party. Do you want to go? It's an immediate, yeah, of course. It's a party. Why would I not want to go to a party? Whereas as adults, someone will say, well, so-and-so is having a party. And this goes through like, well, who's going to be there? What time of day is it? How much money is it going to cost inside the restaurant? What if that individual that I haven't spoken to for a long time shows up? And it's this big, huge inner dialogue that stops the person from going to the party. And the truth is that when we were little kids, we didn't know how the party was going to go, and just as much as we don't know as adults. And yet, it was so much easier for us to make those decisions because we were operating from a place of what if, what could happen. This is and a positive mentality of, this is most likely going to be great. I'm going to assume the best. And then all of a sudden later on, we assume the worst. I'm not going to start that business because of all these bad things that can happen. I'm not going to go up and speak to that person at the bar because all these bad things can happen. I'm not going to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn that I've never met before and see if they want to jump on a Zoom call because of all these bad things can happen. And because of that, ironically, all these bad things happen because we don't create the life that we're so desperately wanting to create.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so incredibly true. And it brings me back to, I had a great relationship with my dad, right out of high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And he's like, okay, you're coming to work for me. And, I'm going to pay you a huge amount of money, $5 an hour. and you're going to, just until you figure out what you want. And as a shy, awkward teenager, I always struggled with, we'd go to these jobs at the time. It was kind of like construction, doing cabling and, work with our hands, right? And I'd get to this job and we'd have to run all these cable in to fix these phones. I would never know where to start. And I would get overwhelmed. And he just said, you know what? Sometimes you just have to start. And you don't have to see what the end looks like. And the next thing you know, you're done. And it's really cool and so powerful. I didn't realize the power of that moment, because any time in my life that I've struggled with decisions, when it be, going from being, an installer or worker dude to going into sales and then expanding my business and all that, it's whenever I'm paralyzed by trying to figure out what the end looks like. And I just remember, just start. And I hear my dad's voice in my head,
right?
Then everything becomes easy. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to figure everything out.
Yeah.
Because you'll figure it out as you go. And sometimes it's not going to work out. But
yeah,
at the end of the day, I'm going to learn from that. And I've taken that into, my business and my life. And it's like, you celebrate your successes and your wins in life, and you learn from what doesn't go right. You learn from your failures and your losses.
Yeah, I think about this with respect to every time you see somebody who's, in many cases, famous, like, they won a Grammy, they won an Oscar, and they're being interviewed by some talk show host. And so often I've noticed that what comes out of their mouth is they'll say, to be honest with you, I can't even believe I'm here. If the younger me ever thought that I would be interviewed by you or that I would have won that award. And the truth is that they didn't focus on being there. They focused on that moment, which was like, I'm just going to write a song today, and then I'm going to write another song in a month. I'm just going to take that acting lesson today, and then I'm going to try out for that play tomorrow. They just look at it in these micro moments, and then one day they look back and go, I can't believe I'm here. And that's because their focus wasn't on being there. Their focus was on the moment. And I think this is so true for everything, in the sense of when you want to make a big change in your life. So one big thing that I'm sure you've come across many people like this. There are so many people who I've met in my life who have just come to a point in their career where they no longer want to do it. Usually it happens when they've come to a financial state of being where they could look at their bank account and go, I could probably survive on that. And for the first time ever in their life, like, I don't actually have to do this. And so that's when they find themselves going, well, then what the hell would I do? And again, I often just say, just go pick up a book on something that you find interesting. Don't worry about making a big plan of exiting this company. Just start reading a book of something you find interesting. And then, of course, you read the book and it gives you another idea, and then it sends you to a documentary. And one documentary sends you to a coffee chat with a friend. And before you know it, all these little micro moments put you into a situation where an opportunity comes up for you to exit and to go into something else. And again, it's just like, just focus on the moment. Now, switching gears for a second. You know, you talked about love in the beginning, and here you are, a guy living in Edmonton, Canada, Alberta, Canada, and I'm just saying that for my many American friends out there. It's where you get a lot of your it's a province where you get a lot of your oil. Let's just put it that way. So you are living in a place where I would call Edmonton a slightly more conservative city, in a more slightly conservative province. And you are this man who's running this successful business. You've got many employees, and you're working in the world of construction. What's it like, you walking through life throwing this word love out there? Are you getting made fun of?
Yeah, you know what? It's an interesting thought and comment. And when I leaned into determining, do I want to put myself out there on a stage to be ridiculed or loved, or whatever you want to call it, you're going to get all sorts of different opinions. It's something that you have to understand and accept. And so far, the feedback's been really good, because I think ultimately people understand human connection, and that we're living in a world of disconnection. So it's like, if you take a step back, so I'm really, I guess I work really hard to be authentic, and I'm not doing this out of a state of I want to be famous and a celebrity and an ego and the next Deepak Chopra or Simon Sinek or something like that.
Right.
I'm coming from a lens of this. We're in a world that needs more love, that needs more connection, and they need more of this human to human conversation. And it starts within us as leaders. And when we talk about entrepreneurs and businesses, they talk about remote work and how do you keep your employees engaged, and how do you create that sense of connection. And then we throw in AI and agentic AI, and we say that the world of jobs are going away and the world of business is changing. There's one thing that can't change, and it's people, consumers. Our consumers are people. Right. And how do we serve that? And I think that that's something that overwrites the fear or the condemnation, or, oh, you're coming from your heart, you're a weak guy, or something like that. Because sometimes the perception is you come from love, it means all lovey-dovey and hug. Yeah. And I'm like, coming from love doesn't mean that you can't hold people accountable. Right. It means I'm going to be curious, and I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm not going to assume that you're lazy and you're working for somebody else and you're intentionally not doing your job. And that's I'm going to ask questions and give you the opportunity to say, maybe something's going on in your world. Right. And that's why you didn't show up the way you normally showed up. Yeah. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And I'm going to encourage my leaders to do the same. And I'm going to bring in people to talk to my employees on a weekly basis that can give them 1% ideas to maybe look at life or how they show up a little bit different, so that they can show up as a better human for the humans that they live with.
Yeah.
Plus, they show up as a better human at work. And so, I don't really care if if you're somebody that thinks that I'm full of crap or don't like the message I'm giving. I ask you the simple question: are you sending that message through fear or love?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. It reminds me a little bit, and I grew up in like a family where my parents were atheists, and so there wasn't a religion for us growing up. And I'd sometimes overhear some of my religious friends' families saying, "What would Jesus do?" And that was always foreign to me. I never really quite understood. I mean, I got it in a sense of like, "Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not, covet thy neighbor," those kinds of things. And it wasn't until years later where I heard someone who was not religious say it in the same way, what would love do? And when I had heard that, it was a kind of a game changer for me. And I understand it now from both sides, the religious side and the non-religious side, because it's the same thing. And that is, you're going into something as simple as a meeting with an employee. And you know that you have to have a difficult conversation with that employee. But just before you go into the conversation, you ask yourself, what would love do? And it's like, well, love would give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they're going through a tough time. Love would, give them a chance to share their perspective, even though it might drive us crazy. And love would give them a second chance. And so, and in some cases, love would let them go from the company because they've made the mistakes so many times. But as long as you're rooted in that, what would love do? It really does guide you to making the easiest decisions. And that makes me think, for you then, if you're tapped into this idea, if you look back at your life at this point now, where would you say, or how would you say you've been most impacted by love in your own life? Whether it was the way that someone else loved you, it probably is that, I guess, but how have you been most impacted by love in your life?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And it depends on how far you go back, because I've, always been part of a loving family, and, I was a late bloomer as a kid. So I was always, kind of bullied a little bit. And, grade 10 and 11, I was like 5'3", 110 pounds. And then in grade 12, I think, is when I went up to like 5'11 and a half and 130. I always make the joke that if I turn sideways, I'm invisible. and really, I think it comes, if I really know it down, the love of my father was pretty intense, and that happened later, but it would be meeting my wife.
Okay.
And,
tell me about that.
I met her, I was 19, she was 18. And, it was, a connection through a best friend of mine. And it was not somebody that I would normally think that, for better sure, that I would have a chance with, right?
Yeah, okay.
And we just connected, and love isn't always perfect, but if you pay attention to it and you focus on it and you communicate, it can blossom.
Right.
So our love, after we've been married for 33 years, and it's gotten stronger over time,
right,
and more resilient over time. So it's the one thing in life that is true. And so I think if you have that, then I know I can get through anything.
Right.
And all the work stuff and the things that happen in life are okay, and they're small, and I'll get through them no matter how big they are. And when my father died, and the impact of that was a big moment that took me a lot, 20 some years. And that's, some of the foundational principles of my TED talk, right? Coming into understanding and unlocking the power of my dad's love, and really celebrating the gifts that he gave me. And, now I can freely talk about my father, and he was an amazing human being. And he ultimately, provided love to the world through music. And he was a musician, and, not a musician that went on, but he had his little band, and he had his own fan base, and he loved music, and he connected to people through that. And, I like to think I provide my own music through maybe my voice, and trying to help people connect to themselves and love themselves, so that they can show up in the world a little bit better for themselves. Right. Which ultimately means they show up better for everybody else. So,
you just reminded me of something that occurred to me not too long ago, which was surprising that it's taken me, almost 52 years now to actually go, oh, wow, that's a true thing. And it occurred to me when I was thinking about my father, and my father is still around. I'm very lucky, and he's just turned 86. And so I was thinking about, the inevitable that will eventually come. And is it this year or is it in 10 years? But it's coming. And I was really kind of coming to terms with that and just feeling a little sad, of course, knowing that that passing will come. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me that no one has ever loved me the way he has.
Mm.
And it doesn't mean that my mom has loved me less or friends or family, whoever, but there is this unique relationship that him and I have had, and it would be impossible for anyone to have loved me the same way that he's loved me. And I realize, and it's even funny, I hope he watches this because I have it all planned out. I do need to tell him this, of course, because you never know how much time you have with people. And so, what is a way that your wife has loved you that is unique to her, and in the sense that only she could love you that way?
I think it's just in the way that she shows up for me and the little things that she does that she knows I don't notice, but she does them anyway.
Mm.
You know, she's always, really throughout my career, she's made sure that all the stuff at home is always taken care of.
Right.
With our son, it was taken care of. There was so much work and so many things she did that went on behind the scenes that she basically set me up so that I could show up better for the rest of the world. And, that takes a lot of, and it means that a lot of times I was in the spotlight and I was getting a lot of the attention and accolades and the attaboys and winning awards. And she's the one that's enabling me to be standing on the stage of life without getting any of that.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest love that I'm getting emotional even thinking about it, that you can give, because she's meant to be on a stage too.
Yes.
And she's finally getting to shine her light to the world and share it. And I look forward to the day that we can be jointly on the stage. She's all about energy and connection to space, where, and we're both and about energy and connection to self. And the more that you unlock that. So if you think of the power of our surroundings, where we live and how it sets up to support us, and then you think about how you set yourself up to support yourself by being present, by being aware, and the two of those worlds combine, we can become unstoppable.
No question.
But so many times we set up our space that is cluttered and busy, and we go home and it's like, poof, like this weight.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that's how she shows her love for me.
That's beautiful. That is really nice. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How so often that can happen in a relationship where one individual, just for whatever reason, they are the ones that are continuously getting the accolades, as you said, and the other person is just as important to the success of the unit, to the partnership of what you've created. And I guess that's one of the reasons why it's so important that the person getting the accolades takes that time to really, acknowledge the person that perhaps isn't getting that stage time. It's wonderful that you have that. I want to bring it back to something. You were talking about the loss of your father and how big of an impact that had on you, and how many years later you really kind of woke up to certain insights about that you hadn't considered at the time. And I'd watched your TED Talk, and one part that really stuck out with me, and I'll tell you why a little bit later, but is how you talked about how your father, when he passed of a heart attack, I believe, and you at the same time were in your own space, a very long distance away from him, and you went into your own physical pain that made you almost drop to your knees. I mean, can you tell us that story about what happened and your connection to your father at the time of his passing?
Yeah, so I was always, my dad had retired like 6 months before, and he was in Yuma, Arizona, living his life in a fifth wheel and playing music every day, and I would talk to him for business advice. I bought the business from him, so occasionally I'd call him and spitball ideas by him, because he was still kind of like my mentor and coach. And then this one day, I was a worker bee at that time, so I was physically out in the field, and I was walking into this phone room when it was like, I never forget, I describe it in detail in my talk, but it was like minus 30 degrees outside. It was really, really cold. It was the depth of winter. I'm in this old kind of construction building that they have this phone room in the second floor, and I'm just about to enter the phone room, and this intense pain in my chest came over, and nausea, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I felt like I was going to pass out, and it didn't just about knock me to the floor. It knocked me to the floor.
Wow.
And I had to lean against the wall and just breathe, and with no idea what the heck was happening with me. I haven't experienced anything like that since. And then I'm not even sure how long it passed.
Right.
And then it was like, I just had this uneasy feeling. And then that's when I finished the job. It was my last job, thankfully, the day, and I drove home. And when I entered the garage, the phone was ringing, and I walked in the house, and, as I'm going to pick up the phone, it was just like, this uneasy feeling was just like, oh my God, something's happened. And I picked up the phone, and it was my aunt, and she's like, my dad died of a massive heart attack. And it was like literally the time that I felt the thing. And it's the really interesting, not interesting part is that I just tucked all that emotion away, and I continued on with life, and my life was okay. And it was good, and I accomplished things, and I had success, and my company grew, and I had a son, and my son continued to grow, and I had this life. And, that my dad's death made me focus more on my family.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't really talk about my dad too much without getting emotional and getting teary. I couldn't celebrate, the knowledge that he shared. I couldn't even look at pictures or videos from him.
Right.
And he was like my closest person in my life. Mm-hmm. And the journey of unlocking that box and finding just pure love inside really helped me understand the power of loving yourself and not living, in sadness or fear, but living in love.
And you mentioned also that it many years later seemed to take you on a spiritual journey in the way that you look at some of the esoteric elements of life, especially what does happen when we pass. Does the soul continue? Do we just die? And you've come out with some very interesting beliefs about that. What would you call those beliefs, and how would you describe them today?
We're going there, are we?
Yeah, you can get as hokey pokey, airy fairy as you like now.
Yeah. So I was raised Roman Catholic, so we're always there's heaven, hell, and that's it. And you're determined by what you do in this short period of life. You're 0 to 100 years that you live on this life, or maybe you're lucky 110.
Yeah.
And that never really settled all that well with me. So I've always been curious to what else is out there. What are other trains of thoughts? And I'm a knowledge taker where I use discernment, and I just read and listen, and Buddhism and all these different spiritual modalities. And for me, it feels like there's more. We're more than just this life.
Yeah.
And whether it be, it resonates a little bit that maybe our soul is an energy being, when we say we're literally made of star stuff. Mm-hmm. So if we're made up of energy doesn't have a start and an end. Energy is eternal. It just goes. So then, we come into this body, and then maybe when our energy leaves this body, energy, our soul, maybe it comes back again in another life to continue to grow and evolve and build and learn. And to me, that feels right. So I'm exploring what that could look like and how I can better show up for myself and others with that in mind. And for me, it gives me a bit of a peace knowing that my dad's journey as I know him is over, but his memory of what I knew is there, and his soul's path is eternal. And he's still going on and doing his thing.
It's interesting that you and I quickly found that common ground, again, from just some guy who's reaching out on LinkedIn to two dudes having a conversation. And within a very short period of time, we're both like having agreement in the fact that we both believe that life continues well after death, and that there is no such thing as death, that the soul just moves on to its next adventure. And we were both chuckling about that, about the, of course, the so-called serendipity of that conversation and how it led you into some of the things that you've been recently exploring and how I happen to know the right person that can help you with that exploration. And it's like there's no surprise to it, right? It's this idea that that a soul would come to planet Earth with the specific intention of having a certain type of journey, and sometimes that might be to be on planet Earth for 5 minutes, and for sometimes it might be for 105 years. And in one case, it might be to be like Brad Pitt and have what looks like an incredible life. And for someone else, it might look like a very unfair life. And yet, no matter which one you have, there will be these serendipities that happen along the way. And I love how often now I've been finding myself in situations, especially with men, because again, I think that we are pre-programmed to, or at least conditioned to not really dive too deep into these kinds of conversations. And with men, the number of times where I've just kind of tossed it out there a little bit over a beer, I toss it out there, just to kind of see what kind of, response I might get. And it's been so interesting how many men really are having these thoughts that you and I have been having for a long time. And they just didn't have an avenue by which to talk about it. And it makes me think, do you find yourself having any excitement about the movement that humanity seems to be slowly going in with respect to being open to the potential of there being more? I mean, we hear about this in the news that there's going to be all this disclosure at some point with respect to, UFOs and alien life beings. It seems like it's getting to the point where the government can no longer keep that a secret. So that's going to expand our perspective on the fact that we're not alone in the universe. But with respect to the idea that there could be life after death and that this might be just one of many lives we've had, what do you think this could lead to if more and more of us start, I guess, this becoming more mainstream, if you will?
Yeah, so I think it's really cool, and I think there is a movement in the world, and it's a matter of, if you practice discernment on what is, it's like, do you know something to be true? With science, it's kind of like materialism versus, there's more than what we can see.
Right.
You can feel the wind. The wind exists because you can feel it. You can feel it blowing on you, but is the wind there? You can't see it. So how does it exist? And there's so much in life that we have five senses, but there's lots of talk that there's more than five senses, that we have way more than that. Yeah. And, but I think it is getting more and more mainstream, and it's like what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. It needs people to love themselves enough, to be brave enough, to take the onslaught of the criticism, and just put your hand up and be brave and say, yeah, I believe in that too. And I think it creates a movement. You look at a simple thing like the Telepathy Tapes podcast. Right. It started out with one person and an idea, and now it's one of the top podcasts that are out there, right? And it's talking about psi abilities and telepathy and, mediums and all sorts of stuff that they try and use a scientific base. And they say that the material world is shifting into more. It's like the Matrix, and some of these movies are maybe have a little bit more reality than what we thought. And then I'm a science guy in some ways, where I look at technology, own a technology company, and you look at AI and quantum computing, and in the laws in some of the quantum computing stuff, and if you take those same laws and you put them to our laws of physics, there's things that work in quantum computing that shouldn't work.
Yes.
So when they do work, and you put those same laws to maybe quantum realities or some of this stuff that's coming out now, they start to make sense. And so there's things that are challenging what we thought was true, but it was true based on our understanding of what was.
That's right. Yeah, I find that part I love, and sometimes it's a little frustrating that we always have to wait for science to, maybe, I don't even want to use the word catch up, but get to the point where they can confirm what it is that hundreds and thousands and millions of people have been saying for so many years. But look, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. And I love that. From a quantum perspective, especially, some of the stuff that's coming out where they're now being able to track a person's consciousness. They're being able to see it moving or leaving, for example, let's say the body upon death. And I just think, gosh, especially with the advent of AI, how far are we until we can track consciousness anywhere, to the point where we can actually, from a discernible perspective, say, it is separate from the physical body. And if that is true, think about how that flips the
Oh
script.
yeah, it flips the script on life so much. Like, and you look at, there's so many cases when near-death experiences, and then when people come back from near-death experiences, that they have these abilities because they've connected on the other side. And
Yeah.
there's so many things that are not explainable by science,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually you get to a certain point, tipping point, where it's like, why do we always have to have science explain?
Right.
And I, one of the things that I talk to is, think of it as human beings. Everybody understands the internet. Everybody understands cellular communication.
Yeah.
And when we went from, pagers at the beginning of the internet, where it was dial up, and then we got, the high speed at home that was a little bit faster, an image would come up
Yeah.
slowly. And then it
Yeah.
went to the lightning speed we have now, or cellular, where it's 3G, 4G, 5G, and how fast it is. As human beings, what is our cell signal? We're all connected, and some people are more connected. Like that connection I had with my dad
Yeah.
was because we were super connected. So we were on like a fiber optic connection,
Mm-hmm.
and it was lightning fast. Because so many people, when you think about somebody I haven't thought of for years, and then I randomly run into him at a coffee shop the same day.
Absolutely. I
Is
love
that by accident?
Yeah.
And you can ask just about anybody, and that happens.
Yeah. Everyone has that story.
Everyone has that story. So it's like, how do we upgrade our signal within ourselves, which allows us to connect better with others? And I think as humanity, we have way more ways of connecting with each other. Like there's 87% of most communication is nonverbal. We're missing out on some of our talk and conversation here because you can't see our limbs, and you can't.
That's right.
You can see my hands when I lift them up.
Yeah.
But you can't. There's lots that we miss out on, right? And so lots of times my wife and I'll experiment with it. We'll be driving back from the mountains, and we'll be coming into the city, and it'll be around supper time, and I'll be like, we should go to our favorite restaurant here. And then I'll just see how long it takes, and then she'll spit out, oh, let's go to, and she'll say the name of the restaurant that I was just sending over to her, right?
No way.
And little things like that happen all the time. So is there something to that? Is it boo hockey? I don't know, but in my personal experience, it is not, and I've seen it happen. And there's so much for me that it's a reality. And is it? How do you upgrade your signal? And to me, it's by starting with yourself.
Well, this is what anybody who is a medium or a mentor in this space will say, which they'll be like, look, my ability as a medium is not unique to me. I just happen to have been able to tap into that gift faster or better than most people. But what they'll teach you is how to increase your frequency so that you can communicate. I always remember someone saying something that I thought was really interesting. They were talking about ghosts, and they were talking ghosts or spirits, whatever you want to call them. And the question was, why is it that whenever you see them in the room, it's only the head, or it's just the head and the shoulders? Like, why don't they show their entire selves? And this medium I thought was really interesting in the way that they answered. They said, because do you have any idea how much they have to increase their frequency to even be seen? And so if they can be seen just by the head, for you to be able to recognize them or to know that they are there, it is unnecessary for them to then raise their frequency that much more to show the entire body. It's essentially a shortcut, a hack, if you will. And I never had seen it and thought about it from that perspective. And I thought that was really interesting. Or an even better example would be you're not going to see the person's face, but you see a shimmer of light. Or you see, if some people are lucky enough to see an orb. And again, there's been hundreds of thousands of people who have reported these types of sightings, to the point where I always say, I don't need them all to be right. I only need one of them to be right for me to believe that this stuff is true. It's like crop circles. Everyone's like, well, you know what? It could have been a bunch of teenagers pushing the ground. That's fine. Do you know there's been over 3,000 crop circles in England in like so many years? I don't need all 3,000. Right. I'll give you that 99% of them are done by teenagers, but I'm pretty sure that not all of them were, right? And so I really get excited about that because I know that in my own personal life, there have been moments where I've just been vibing on that frequency. Like I've been meditating, I'm feeling good about life. I've done my gratitude, so I've raised my frequency up, and I've had some phenomenal moments that have happened. One that comes to mind. I don't know if I spoke to you about this when we first met, but I was in my office back in my home, and the whole family was asleep, and my Bluetooth speaker is in the kitchen, which is on a whole other floor. I was upstairs, and I'm in the dark, and I've had just a really great meditation, and I'm reaching out to my spirit guides, and I said, and I was having a little bit of doubt, and I said, if you are like 100% like tapped into me right now, could you just do something quickly to make me really feel like you're there? And all of a sudden, my Bluetooth speaker down in the kitchen, which I had turned off an hour earlier, went connected to Stuart's iPhone. And I thought, wow, okay, that's random. I don't even have my phone on me. That was pretty cool. Okay. And then I said, okay, that was awesome. Thank you. Could you do it again? And all of a sudden they went, connected to Stuart's iPhone again. Well, Mike, I continued to do this 5 more times. And they did it five more times. So for 5 times in total. And I was just like, I'm a believer. I got it. Like I know that, electrical frequencies can sometimes just go off by themselves. And there's a very explainable way of, a way of explaining it. But 5 times? Okay.
When you ask.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. When and
there's coincidence, and then sometimes there's like
eventually. So what do you think from a business perspective? If let's say more and more business leaders start wrapping their head around this level of consciousness, and that perhaps we are here for more than just selling widgets, how do you think it would then impact the world of work? Because since the Industrial Revolution, the mentality has basically been a bunch of human beings. They come to a space and they create an output, and then they sell that output to a buyer, and everyone gets their paycheck and they go home. But I feel like there's a shift in humanity in the way that we're actually, the paradigm, if you will, the way that we see work today. If you were to see more and more business leaders wrapping their head around this stuff, how do you think it would shift things in the world of work?
Yeah, one, it would be exponentially transformational. But let me take a step back into when the corporations were formed. So a lot of the premise, especially when you get public corporations, they were performed and acted like an entity. So the needs of the corporation outwit the needs of the employee. So that's where, we came in an age of it's all about profits. It's all about, keeping the public entity healthy. Right? So that we gave it a persona, but it was missing one crucial thing. What do you think that thing, that persona of corporations in the public world we live in today is missing?
Today that we have if
you have one crucial element of the public corporations in the world, if you treat it as a persona and a person, it's an individual, what is it missing?
That they don't love. They don't have a
heart. They're missing the heart.
Right.
And so they're looking out. It's like AI without the emotion. And the literal being of itself is protect the consciousness of that corporation, meaning profits before people.
Right.
So in the world, if we can unlock this love leadership, you're putting the heart in the persona of the corporation. And if leaders can come and talk, think more holistically about my corporation is an entity, is a being, is an energy source. And if I can have my corporation come from love and for the betterment of my people and my customers and the products that I build, profit will come. And people will be attracted to your organization. It will to me, love is 10 times more powerful than fear or anger or pain. Yeah. And love conquers all. So it's like when they take, light workers in the world or people that are spreading love, whatever you want to call them, you don't need near as many people as you do angry people. Right. Because if you ever run into somebody that's super angry and you just bathe them with love, they run away.
That's right. Yeah. They don't even know what's happening. It's funny that you say this. What I love about what you just said is And it's something that I've come up against with a lot of the work that I do, was specifically teaching organizations how to connect better with their employees and with their customers, whoever it may be. And from my experience, I've seen that most corporations, they'll say, okay, once we get everything done, all the tasks have been completed, and if there is time left over at the end, we will dedicate that to connecting with each other on a meaningful level and building meaningful relationships. And I'm often trying to switch the paradigm to, no, if you focus on building those meaningful relationships first, all the tasks are then done much more easily after that. And it's such an insane paradigm shift, because they're like, no, we've got so many emails, we've got so many meetings, and we've got so many reports, and I've got so many customers I got to call. I just don't have time to love. And that seems to be the paradigm shift that we're trying to create here.
Yeah, 100%. That's why in my own company, I have a 30-minute meeting with all my staff virtually every Thursday morning, where I bring in experts, and that's a time for all my staff that they can tune in. And I'll do a talk on a certain conversation and try to engage people, what their thoughts are on it, or we'll do an interview of a staff so other people, because we have remote people working right across Canada, can get to know them, or I'll bring in an expert like yourself where we have a conversation like this.
Right.
And the whole intent is maybe you'll come out of it thinking something that you can put into practice in your life that can make you 1% better. Maybe it'll open up your perspective to look at things from a different light, because ultimately, whether something's good, bad, or not, is how we look at it. And if you can sometimes perspective, I use the analogy. I go home all the time, and my wife with feng shui, she's always moving stuff around. and I'll walk in and I'll notice something and I'll go like, oh, that's super cool. When did you put that there? And she'll be like, 3 weeks ago. but then from that moment forward, I can't unsee that.
Right.
Because it's now firmly embedded in my reality. And it's like our brain there's so much stuff coming in at us every moment that we filter out the majority of it. We only see, I think there was millions of bits of information, or over 1 million bits, and we filter it to 128. Okay. So what are we seeing in our under 128 bits of life that we're looking at? And how do we slow down to maybe change the filter of what we're looking at, or question what we're looking at? Is there more there? Is there something I'm not seeing? Yes. And so I'm a big component of not just business, but as humans, we need to look at our bits of information that we're incorporating in our judgments and go, be curious. Is this true? Is it really true?
Right.
What could different look like? And question ourselves, especially when we feel strongly about something.
It really is just operating again on just a higher frequency, as you were mentioning earlier on. And that's a choice. That's the one thing I really want to remind people of, is that this stuff doesn't just happen by chance. I just did a video on LinkedIn, I think it was, earlier on today, where I overheard a conversation while I was walking down the street, and there was a man and a woman, probably in their 30s, standing behind me, very close, on the street, so I could hear their conversation as we were essentially moving in the same direction. And she was talking to him about how she used to live in this neighborhood. And I heard her saying, oh, there used to be a bar there. That's a hardware store now, and this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden he turns around and I overhear him say, that's great, that's great. So what would you say is your biggest memory from the time that you used to live in this neighborhood? And I just wanted to turn around and hug this guy, because I just felt like, wow, you get it. You're deliberately choosing to increase your vibration and to ask that individual a question that has now given them the opportunity to share information with you that could quite likely cause the two of you to connect on a higher level. And it won't happen if you choose to go, oh, that's really great. No, that's awesome. I thought about living in this neighborhood once, and then moving on to the next topic. It was an opportunity missed. And so the same, I think, is true for leadership, in the sense that as you go into work every single day, how wide open are your eyes? And are you able to, see those moments? Like I often say in one of my keynotes, where, you're walking past the receptionist and you say, hey, how's it going? And they say, oh, it's good. And they say, one of those days. And I say, so often a person goes, oh, yeah, I know what you mean. And then they keep on walking, right? And it's like, or you could pause and say to that individual, well, what's making it one of those days? And then all of a sudden they start telling you about, their kid getting, into a fight at school or something. And, and now we're connecting in a meaningful way. And so it's really, again, back to the word love, just choosing to show up with love.
Yeah. Love it, and 100% agree. It's like unlock the power of real human connection, which is being curious and asking more.
Yeah.
People hate networking events. You hate going to events because it's like, if you look at who we are as humans, as icebergs, people just stay on the surface, skating on the top of it, and it's boring. Like, like
Right.
5 minutes in. But if you can somehow dive deep, then you can feel the connection. Like, I love to ask people, go there and just ask people a question like, tell me, who you are. What's your 30-second elevator pitch, not your business.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, like, I'm a curious human that
Mm-hmm.
that loves connection, that loves my family, going outdoors and climbing
Yeah.
mountains and running a business and being an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur. And then that gives you all sorts of strings to pull on to ask
I
me
love
further
it.
questions, right? And so that's like the best conversation starter you can do
I
but
know.
people struggle with that. It's just like,
Yeah.
if you're in a better thing, if you ask people like, what's 3 things you love about yourself?
Oh my God.
People are like,
What's your agenda? I mean, I literally just went through this about an hour ago, and I've often noticed this in my life where I talk to everybody. I think that you probably are very much the same way. Young and old, gay and straight, black and white, doesn't matter to me. And so, but I do notice, and it just makes me chuckle a little bit, and I don't blame them. But when I speak to young women, and I had just come out of a CrossFit class, and you start getting to know certain people in your class. And so this one woman standing next to me, and we're both kind of going through our lockers and grabbing our shoes out and jackets and stuff. And I turned to her, that was crazy class today, huh? Oh my God, I can't believe how much I'm sweating. And she's like, yeah, yeah. But then, and she had mentioned that she has to go back to work. And I said, so what's that like, with your job? Are you can just only jump out for an hour? Yeah, I can only jump out for an hour. And I go, so what are they doing now? Are they trying to get you guys to come back to work? Just really building a conversation with her. And she starts walking backwards away from me. And I understand it because more often than not, when a man shows interest in their lives, that they actually do have an agenda, that they're trying to maybe turn this into a date, which, it's so comical to me because I am so much older than her. I'm like, you do realize I'm not trying, but again, I get it. She's probably had men my age who have hit on her. And yet I will say this is that the situation that I've had where I've done this with other people, whether they're men or people who are my age or people who let's say are standing behind the cafe and the counter at the cafe and they're serving me a coffee, people become so suspicious when you show genuine interest in their lives. It's always the where's this going mentality. And that's, I guess, again, as leaders, all we can do is just keep trying and hopefully dissuading them from thinking that that's the case.
and I think that for sure, but vulnerability creates connections.
Mm.
So it's a matter of, in certain circumstances, there's, how do you create a vulnerability moment? How do you create a small little share that open the door to a bigger share?
Right.
And some people you can feel are open to that and other people aren't. I'll find that, sometimes I'll have a conversation with a complete stranger and like 10 minutes later, they're telling me that's all their secrets and drama and the whole kit and caboodle, right? But it's a matter of, it just tells you that the world is starving for people to listen. And it's a matter of, when people go, what do you do to relax? What do you do to take a break? And they're like, well, I, take a time and I'll watch Netflix or I'll scroll on Instagram or Facebook. And it's like, that's not really being present. People sometimes, and that's what I really truly learned is where the power of sometimes of understanding comes in the moments of silence, going for a walk by yourself without a podcast on, without music on, just walking in nature or sitting in a meditation or taking 5 quiet moments and just focusing on your breath. Like, I think that's where it starts. So if people go, where do I start? How do I get better connected to myself? And, my biggest hack, and I ended my TED talk with it, is just look in the mirror when you get up in the morning and just go, I love you, and give yourself a high five. I love you, Mike. You're awesome. And if you don't believe it, it doesn't matter. But if it's difficult for you to say that and you go, that's silly, that means that you should do it. And then just see what happens, and then say that before you go to bed. And you start to trust yourself more, and you start to believe in yourself more by just saying those 4 simple words. And transformation start small. Like, I love Atomic Habits and 1% Better. And it's like, how hard is it to do that? Just like people go, I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week and I'm going to transform and I'm going to change my eating habits and I'm going to, in times of stress, we fall back into our unconscious habits because that's what we do. So how do you instead of this great big huge goal, how do you make it simple?
Yeah.
Saying I love you to yourself, putting your shoes at the back door and go, I'm going to put my shoes on this morning and see what happens. He talks about that. And then you walk, you put your shoes on. Well, my shoes are on. I might as well walk to the end of the driveway.
No,
and then it's like, okay, this week I'm going to walk around the block. And then you just get something that becomes, that's what I did with my meditation. And, I have peace with myself when I have certain days and I can't do it. Mm-hmm. But then I do it in different moments in smaller buckets of time, or I do it when I'm hiking in the mountains. My wife and I go, and sometimes we don't talk. We just stare at the surroundings until we remind each other to go, hey, babe, turn around. And we go, holy crap, how the heck did we come up this high? And look how far we are. And I look at that analogy for life is sometimes we forget when we go through life and benefit. I'm 56 years old. It's like I've climbed the mountain of life and I used to forget to turn around and look how far I've come. And now I celebrate that moment all the time and knowing that there's more mountain peaks in front of me and I'm going to continue climbing. But what I'm not going to do is forget to turn around and see how far I've come.
Oh, it's so great. And when you talk about that self-connection piece, it is, to me, an epidemic that sadly has happened. And of course, it's because of the phones. You see this with respect to, like, I always find it because I do a lot of travel and I'm constantly, there I am in the waiting area to board the plane. Look around. I guarantee you the next time you fly, you'll see 5% of the people are staring at their phones instead of taking advantage of what used to be the greatest people watching venue in the world, airports. I see this as well when I go to the gym. I've always been amazed at how quick a person picks up their phone in between sets. Like they do 10 reps on the bench press, immediately to the phone. Am I missing anything? And I quite often, just for fun of it, I shouldn't do it, but I look over their shoulder to see what they're looking at. It's not like they're getting back to an important text message, which I can understand. They're flipping through Instagram. Just flipping through videos and then, and 1 minute's gone, back to my bench press, stand up, and right back to it again. And I think, God, I love those moments where I just stand there in between sets and I just look around. And I'm like, I could be bored, but I'm just looking around. And sometimes I'll get an idea or I'll think about somebody I haven't thought of for a while. And, whatever the case may be, it puts me into a better state of being. So, yeah, it's important to do that self-connection. Let me finish this off with another question. A last question. I could ask you 1,000 more questions. I'm really enjoying this conversation, and there's so many tangents we could go on. But as you said, you've kind of reached that pinnacle, in a sense of you got to the top of the mountain you've checked a lot of boxes in life. The boxes that society says is, what success truly is. Successful business, successful marriage, great kid, you take time in nature, all these things that we're supposed to aspire to. So based on that perspective, though, if you could give humanity, anybody, no matter who they are, a piece of advice that what you've learned along the way, that a person should use as a way of living a great life, what would that piece of advice be?
Be present as much as you can. So appreciate the small moments. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many of them that we just miss by in our busyness to go to the next thing. And what happens if you start focusing on those small moments? They turn into bigger moments. So, yeah, take a moment to notice the moments between the moments.
Yeah.
And my explanation of that is, before I started meditating, I would drive to work and I'd always be thinking about all the different things that I had to do. And sometimes I wouldn't even realize, how the heck did I get to the office already? Because my driving is done unconsciously. I'm paying attention to traffic and everything else, but that's just my programs are running to get me there.
Right.
And then I noticed this world unlock that I didn't even know exists. Like I got my convertible and it's my favorite thing. And I put the roof down in the moment and some of the sunsets and sunrises that I've seen or the skies and, driving in a field and there's a coyote stopping and looking back at me.
Wow.
Or this morning driving in, there was like the moon was like a quarter moon, and there was this cloud that was right above it and a star off to the right. And I'm like, wow, that's magical, that I
Mm.
wouldn't see. So how much, back to that 128 bits, how much of the beauty of the world are you missing because you're
Mm.
focused on where you're going, not where you are?
I feel that way. I've never thought about this comparison before, but you just made me think about it just now. The difference between riding my bicycle through the city of New York and walking through the city of New York, and both are wonderful experiences in their own way. But the difference between what I see walking compared to what I see biking is night and day. When I walk, I notice a restaurant I've never seen before, even though I've walked down that street so many times. I overhear a conversation. I see a graffiti, a beautiful graffiti painting that I've never seen before, and so it really does. The slower you go, the more you see, and
And what opportunities that you actually see come that restaurant that you've never noticed before? Is that maybe a sign that maybe you should check it out
that's
and
right.
there's an opportunity there? So when you talk to, circling back to those people that are struggling and life's given them lemons, and they want to do better, what opportunities are you missing that are being put in front of you because you're so tied up in your own chaos that you don't take the time to open up your eyes to see?
Yes, I remember, and I'll say this, I'll wrap it up here. But in the mentorship I've done with different mediums and different spiritual leaders, one of the things that I think is so interesting is when they all say, "Your spirit guides on the other side are so excited to help you expand and to become a bigger version of yourself, but they can't do that unless you help them. They want to transpire with you, but you have to give them something to transpire with. And if you're just locked in your phone or you're locked in your negativity or whatever it might be, a large percentage of your day, they're like, listen, I'm right here, ready for a conversation. You just need to slow down and take 5 seconds to listen, and we can work together on this." And that's something that's always stuck with me. I find that even at the end of the day, when I go through my own list of things I'm grateful for that happened that day, it's phenomenal how many tiny things that I'm grateful for. Sure, I can say I'm grateful for this really wonderful podcast today, but I'll also be grateful for the fact that that my kid may have said something on the way to school, or that I got a chance to wear those brand new socks that I just purchased. Those little things that you like, but you don't acknowledge. And then it's not until you go through the gratitude of it, you're like, oh, wow, there were a lot of amazing moments today. I just forced myself to wake up and see them. That's
they're
creative
they're
bliss.
all, they're always there. It's like we have the radio station, and you can't, or your favorite music station or YouTube channel, or you don't hear any of it unless you tune into it.
Right.
So it's like, what do you want to tune into? What do you want to
Yeah.
connect to? And what, you know, energy follows intention and desire.
Yes. Yeah.
So where do you want your energy to be?
Yeah. And it'll move fast.
You know,
Um,
move fast.
Awesome. Well, Mike, listen, thank you for taking the time to be on this podcast today. I know we went over time, but I appreciate you being here and being vulnerable and being open to sharing your story. Folks, we're going to make sure that you have links to everything that Mike's up to in the notes here. So I won't go through it now, but we will be looking forward to your book coming out soon as well. For those of you who are listening, Mike is ready and available to get on your stage as well and share his story and to share love with your audience. And I do encourage you to look him up, whether it's on LinkedIn or any other platform out there that he's currently showing up on, because he's got a lot of great things to say, and I think that you'll benefit from paying attention to it. So without further ado, Mike, thank you for being on You Gotta Meet.
Appreciate it. It was an amazing conversation. I feel like I could talk to you forever. So thank you for that.
I look forward to many more, my friend.